So inside of LightWave, we've imported our geometry, and you can see when it comes into LightWave Modeler, then we have triangulated geometry, which is fine for what we need. But if you really want to get back to quads with this, um, one of the ways you can do this is to come in here, select your polygon tool, and hit Shift Z to merge these together. It's a bit of a tedious job to do that, but as I said, you don't really need to do that because we're not going to be doing any sub-patching here. All this geometry is there just to help us to create maybe new objects onto some of these surfaces, or swap some of these things around. You can see here, for example, that we could kind of come in here, select all this geometry here for the glass panels, and create them on a different layer and start separating out the geometry into something which gives us a little bit more flexibility when we're inside of layout. So that's one option you can do. I've gone ahead and I've cleaned this geometry up, so let's take a look at that file. So here's my final scene here. I've got lots of elements in here, and you can see it's been completely rebuilt. So let's look at the layers that I've created. So first of all here, let's just get my mesh in the right place. There we go. First of all here you can see all those triangles have now gone. That was just cleaned up. Just because I prefer working with quads. And this area here is very important. This is going to be basically giving me the ability to match the shadow that we were talking about earlier. Another reason for creating the geometry that you can work with in terms of modeling easily is down here. If you notice down here, we've got this these extruded bricks, and this is really important because these walls are not perfectly in line. As we said before, the thickness of the mortar varies, and also it pushes the bricks up, and they're not perfectly flat. So having the ability to come in here and select a brick, and maybe just hitting E on the keyboard and just extruding it up a little bit, it gives us a little bit of definition in the floor itself, and helps with the shadows, etc. Again, it's a detail thing. It's not actually needed probably, but it really depends on your project and how detailed you want it to be. You can see here that what I've done is I've created some points where I'm going to insert the glass pieces. I've cut the original ones out, which I extruded inside of SketchUp, and I've used those on a separate layer. So let's click the next layer, and you can see those pieces here. I've given them a little bit of a bevel as well, just to see if they can catch the light a little bit better, rather than having a sharp edge. And the other object I created was this one, which is just it was just a little mimicking the brickwork, and a little texture on there as well, and just some cutout on the brick where I can insert a piece of glass. That's at the moment that's currently in the center of this mesh, only because in layout I can come in and I can position it wherever I want to. For example, if I decide I don't want it in this location, I can move it somewhere else. So the other part of this geometry is this background stage here. This is actually unnecessary to put in. The only reason I did it is because I found it helped with my reflections. I used the shadow catcher mainly for front projection technique, which we'll look at in a different tutorial, and it did help with the reflections because I was finding that some of the reflections were getting cut off. We'll look at that shortly. And I created this was the piece which was inserted into that. Those bricks that I made. I had this rather large reflector in here which got shrunk down, and a new set of glass panels there. So let's just highlight those, put that reflector in the background. So this is basically what my final scene looked like. Okay, so here we are inside of layout, and I've imported my geometry and obviously the camera data, which we looked at in the first tutorial. So the geometry is now inside of layout, and I've positioned these objects which I created inside of Modeler into their locations, and that's basically all I needed to do. And the only thing that I've been setting up is the light source. This is my main light source. If we just click on the properties here, we can check it out. I've turned my ambient intensity right down, and I'm using the DP infinite light and setting the angle down here to 3 just to give me a nice soft shadow. So I've positioned this light now so it matches the original shadow in the shot. So the next stage was to create some textures for the surfaces, for the glass panels. This was textured inside of Modeler as well. So let's look at the surface editor here. We've got our cement for the mortar, which is procedural using turbulence. We've got our floor, which is a node, which is just a shadow catching node. I put a little bit of reflection on there just because those the original brickwork did seem to be not reflective exactly, but they did have quite a shiny surface on them, as I remember. So I've tried to mimic that with a little bit of reflectivity. So the other one here, this floor 2, was something I was just testing out to try and get some dark shadowing underneath the glass. We'll look at that in the final render. And we have the glass base color here, which was the this was the for use down here at the base of the glass. And then we have the glass panels themselves, which uses the dielectric node. Double click on there. I've tried to mimic that color that was used inside of on the original glass, setting the absorption to 10 and the refraction index to 1.55, and that's all really a set on that. Nothing too fancy. And this was the object for the this object here, which was basically just an image, a texture, just trying to mimic the original color and just putting these little white flakes and scratches and things on there to mimic what we could see. And the other one is just a reflector to help with my reflections in the scene. So that was it really. That's all there was to it. And so let's take a render now and take a look at the result. Okay, after 2 minutes and 34 seconds we have a render, and this is the final result. and it's not too bad. It looks okay. There are some problems with it which need further work on them. So let's look at those problem areas first. So I'm at 50% at the moment. Let me zoom in a little bit closer. Now I've just jump back over here and just check out my camera settings for a second. So my camera properties here. I've used the multiplier just to reduce the render time down a little bit. So I've used minimum of 5 samples, maximum 10. And I also use the Mitchell Soft reconstruction filter, just to give it that soft, fluffy look that the original had. You can see here it was a little bit fluffy around the edges, and I didn't really want to have extremely crisp, clean geometry all the way around, because it wouldn't have looked quite, it wouldn't have merged quite well with the background plate. So the Mitchell Soft filter just helps to soften it a little bit and help it to blend in more with the actual image itself. So looking at the render, we can see here that we've got some nice reflections going on here. First of all, look at the back of the original glass panels, and it was getting some sun from, I assume, this reflected sunlight from the glass building in the background was hitting this, and you can see here it's casting these shadows as well back towards the camera here. And so what I tried to do here was to create a reflector which was going to reflect this light here and mimic that. And it had partial success. I think these ones over here, these panels in the background here, are almost matching nicely with these ones. But you can see that when we come to the foreground panels here, particularly this one, if we look over on this side, the edges here on this panel are a lot lighter, and these ones are quite dark. This may be because of the reflection that textured environment may have been just a little bit too dark, and it's reflecting those dark that dark background texture. This texture, that we used here on these bricks isn't too bad. It's not quite the same in terms of color, and but you get the idea. And the mortar in the middle, it's got a little variation in the color, which was kind of trying to match the variation that we can see down here. And we've got these white. I'm not really sure what this white stuff is here on there, but I've tried to incorporate that into the texture as well. So the shadows that we can see here are matched quite well. A little bit dark, maybe we could try and lighten that up. But the actual angle of that shadow was pretty good. Pretty pleased with that one. And we can see here as well, when I was creating that base glass surface, what I was trying to do was to mimic this dark area which you can see under every glass panel. Now you can see on my geometry here, on my render, that it's actually brighter. It's not quite correct. So that's something that we would need to look at and revise, just to get it to look a little bit more like this one. I am assuming these were sunk quite deep into this floor, so maybe that's something that I need to do rather than changing the surface. So after this initial pass, we kind of we're looking okay. It's far from perfect, but we've got some nice reflections going on. We've almost got the color right. We could probably go a little bit darker with the color as well. You can can't really see that here because there's no glass that's doubling up behind the other. For example, this in the original, there's a second glass piece behind this one here, and you can see we've got in this very dark turquoisey color, and where mine double up, we're not quite reaching that nice color. So that could be improved as well. But that really concludes this section here. What I'm going to do is provide a link to these files, the background plate plus the scene that I created, and the LightWave object file. And if you want to, you can download these files, and maybe you can create some glass panels of your own, maybe create some geometry of your own and try and incorporate it into the scene. Or maybe you want to try and fix the problems here and do a better job than I did. It shouldn't be that difficult to improve what I've done here. But those files will be available to you, and let's see what other people can come up with this scene. As I said, that concludes this section. I hope you've learned something from it, and I hope you can take something away from this camera matching tutorials. And I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Plenty more to come. And so, without further ado, I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.